Why do you become police officers, black men and women? That's the $1 billion question that always seems to garner a generic answer. I'll be back. Hey, welcome back everyone. Thank you for returning. Thank you for checking out our vids, liking, commenting, and subscribing. We really appreciate it. Now let's get on with this content. Before I start, I want to put this out there. It may sound a little controversial, but hey, I never ran from asking or expressing unpopular things. As I was gathering content for this video, I thought about how the police department deals so harshly and unfairly when it comes to black folks. I wondered why. And this is a history of this since the slave patrol. And it's been proven that the police department came about because of the slave patrol. You guys can deny it if you want to. I really don't care. Let's go on. I wonder why would a black person want to insert themselves in such a system that was built off first lies and deceit by lying and saying that the police department isn't the slave patrol in modern times. But, you know, it's built on racism, which is fear and hatred and insecurity. Why? So I thought that I believe some black people have joined the force to separate themselves from the stigma of being black and always being associated with a criminal or as a criminal. They wanted to be known that they aren't black criminals. What you have to understand is that you're dealing with over 400 years of poisonous, toxic, sickening mentalities. It will take more than you trying to prove what they have projected onto you, which is how they really are. Criminal minded. And trying to prove something to another man or woman, that's your first mistake. And trying to prove anything to people who allow themselves to believe lies that have been consistently proven to be lies. You're wasting your time on people who have been proven, to me, in my opinion, that most, if not some, if not most of them, are truly incorrigible people, mentally and soul wise. Let's go on. I've asked numerous black men why have they become police officers. I always, without fail, get the same answer. I want to change things from the inside. That's what they, most have said. I think one guy told me that he became a police officer because his father was one. And then I asked him, why did your father become one? And he said they wanted to change things. I was like, okay. You want to know what my response is to that answer? I usually say, how's that working out? Do you know what they say back to me? Nothing. I ascertain that the reason I get that response is because they know that within the time frame that they have been officers of law, since black men and women have been allowed to join this slave patrol union, or the only thing they have seen that changes is the date and the time. That's it. Is it arrogant of them, naive of them to think they have the ability to change a system that was erected for the sole purpose of literally monitoring every move of black America, making or ensuring that they are doing nothing to upset, harm, or cause white Americans any form of discomfort? The U.S. Police Department is the modern day slave patrol. In the 1930s, ex-slaves were asked to compare the slave patrollers to modern police. They said there's no difference, only that slave patrollers were worse. I will insert a link in the description to the video that I recently did about modern police. Let's go on. First, I want to share a little bit about what happened to black police officer named Donald Olson Kimbrough, a black patrolman who dared to expose what white racist police did, and this occurred in the 1970s. Donald Olson Kimbrough was a U.S. Air Force veteran who began his career with the Detroit Police Department in 1970. He was married and the father of one child. Kimbrough became a police officer in order to do something significant for the community by enforcing the law fairly. In his second year on the job, Kimbrough took a stand against police brutality by white officers, as a number of black policemen did during the late 60s and 70s, and gave evidence against them in the ensuing investigation. It is likely that in his willingness to confront police brutality and misconduct shaped DPD's response to a tragic incident in 1972 when Donald Kimbrough was shot by two white men during a murky narcotics-related encounter and subsequently paralyzed. He received no compensation or recognition by the DPD after becoming a victim of gunfire by criminals, in stark contrast to the typical and overwhelming law enforcement response when white officers were shot and are killed in the line of duty. Other black officers, led by the Concerned Police Officers for Equal Justice, charged the DPD with racial discrimination in the treatment of wounded officers and protested on Kimbrough's behalf. Officer Kimbrough, who was 26 years old when shot, eventually returned to DPD on limited desk duty, but had to take a medical retirement for permanent disability in 1977. He never recovered from his injuries and died on December 7, 2017, at the age of 71. And I never heard about this man. He died not too long ago. Almost 10. Well, let me see. This is 2024. Yeah. He didn't die that long. Okay, let's continue. Now, here's something he witnessed that, and one of the things he reported against white racist police officers, aka slave patrolmen. In February 1971, LaShondra Randolph, a 25-year-old black American woman, was stopped by a car holding 4 DPD officers as she drove down Cass Avenue near the campus of Wayne State University, where she was a student. 3 of the officers were white, and the only black officer, Donald Kimbrough, was riding in the back seat. 2 of the white officers, Anthony Valette and Michael Zilowski, stated that Randolph had been speeding, searched her car, confiscated her license, and then arrested her, fleeing and eluding law enforcement. According to LaShondra Randolph's account, made in a formal complaint to the DPD, the 2 white officers stopped her for no legitimate reason, repeatedly called her racial epithets, and then kicked and injured her after placing her in her car while under arrest. Among other misconduct, Randolph stated that the officers called her an uppity negress and a black bitch, threatened to fix your ass, roughed her up during the arrest, and then kicked her in the legs, requiring hospital treatment after her release from jail. After the incident, Patrolman Donald Kimbrough told LaShondra Randolph the real reason that the white officers detained and beat her, because she had a Free Angela Davis bumper sticker on her car in support of the prominent Black Power radical who was incarcerated in California at the time. A racist judge in the 1800s, I think it was when what's the man name who is the big famous case everybody talks about, the man who was fighting for his freedom. The judge in the case, you know, they ruled against that case, but the racist judge said that there's no law that a white man, black people don't have a right. Their rights do not need to be respected by a black man, basically. A white man. So that's why, you know, this country, they had all these racist statues before 2020. They can support whoever they want to, but when we support someone who brought them, you know, who came in and shattered their perfect white world, they came against you. This woman couldn't have a sticker on her car saying free Angela Davis because she stood up against this racist system. That pissed them off. But you know what anger is? Fear. That's why we are targeted so much. Let me go on. Second part, I'm going to share what a black patrolman experienced during his time on the police force, aka Slave Patrol. This article was written in 2016. On any given day in any police department in the nation, 15% of officers will do the right thing no matter what's happening. 15% of officers will abuse their authority at every opportunity. The remaining 70% could go either way depending on whom they are working with. So he said 15% of officers will do the right thing no matter what. 15% would abuse their authority at every opportunity, and 70% will go either way. So if one officer, this 70%ish officer, is riding with an asshole, he's going to do what the asshole does. The other one, if he's riding with someone who's upstanding and actually is on a police force to help everyone, he's going to mirror that officer. So, you are a waste. You're a waste of flesh. Let's go on. That's a theory from my friend K.L. Williams, who has trained thousands of officers around the country in use of force. Based on what I experienced as a black man serving in St. Louis Police Department for 5 years, I agree with him. I work with men and women who become cops for all the right reasons. They really wanted to help make their communities better, and I work with people like the president of the Police Academy class, who sent out an email after President Obama won in 2008 election that included the statement, "I can't believe I live in a country full of niggers lovers." He patrolled the streets in St. Louis in a number of black communities with the authority to act under the color of law. The remaining 70% of officers are highly susceptible to the culture in a given department. In the absence of any real effort to challenge department cultures, they become part of the problem. If their command ranks are racist or allow institutional racism to persist, or if a number of officers in their department are racist, they may end up doing terrible things. It is not only white officers who abuse their authority. The effect of institutional racism is such that no matter what color the officer abusing the citizen is, in the vast majority of these cases of abuse, that citizens will be black or brown. That is what is allowed. They probably demanded too. No matter what an officer has done to a black person, that officer can always cover himself in the running narrative of risk and sacrifice that is available to a uniformed police officer by virtue of simply reporting for duty. Cleveland police officer Michael Brillo was acquitted of all charges against him in the shooting deaths of Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, both black and unarmed. 13 Cleveland police officers fired 137 shots at them. Brillo, having reloaded at some point during the shooting, fired 49 of the 137 shots. He took his final 15 shots at them after all the officers stopped firing. 122 shots at that point. And fearing for his life, he jumped onto the hood of the car and shot 15 times through the windshield. So I thought that when you feared your life, when you feared for your life, you ran away from situations. Oh my God, they're going to get me. I need to run away. You don't run to, Slave Patrol, I'm trying to tell y'all. Let's go on. Not only was this excessive, it was tactically asinine. If Brillo believed they were armed and firing, but they weren't armed and they weren't firing, Judge John Odell acquitted Brillo under the rationale that because he couldn't determine which shots actually killed Russell and Williams, no one is guilty. Let's be clear. This is part of what the Department of Justice means when it describes a pattern of unconstitutional policing and excessive force. Why didn't all the police officers go down? You know what? There was a way they could have found out who shot who. On paper, we're all supposed to have the same rights, right? After slavery, and then the Constitution said that, you couldn't continue to discriminate against ex-slaves, that racism was a badge of slavery. For those who have never, looked up the Constitution in that regards, yeah, racism is a badge of slavery, so it's illegal. So if we're all supposed to be under one umbrella when it comes to the law, on paper, but in some of these people's minds who are just, are going to be racist until they die, they don't have to respect the law when it comes to us. And they show you, the police department shows you how a lot of these white racists feel about the law and black people. There's no such thing as respecting the law when it comes to black people. They show you that all the time. And then, like, the little minions that walk around and question you like you're like you're a slave, with a piece of paper in your pocket from your enslaver telling you that you have permission, or saying that you have permission to leave the plantation. That's how all these minions, these foolish white people, follow you around, asking you basically, "Hey, niggers, where's your slave paper?"
Let's go on. Nevertheless, many Americans believe that police officers are generally good, noble heroes. A Gallup poll from 2014 asked Americans to rate the honesty and ethical standards of people in various fields. Police officers ranked in the top 5, just above members of the clergy. The profession, the endeavor is noble, but this myth about the general goodness of cops obscures the truth of what happens to be done to fix the system. It makes it look like all we need to do is hire good people rather than fix the entire system. Here's what I wish Americans understood about the men and women who serve their police departments and what needs to be done to make the system better for everyone. As a new officer with the St. Louis in the mid-90s, I responded to a call for an officer in need of aid. I was partnered that day with a white female officer. When we got to the scene, it turned out that the officer was fine and the aid call was canceled. He'd been in a foot pursuit chasing a suspect in an armed robbery and lost him. The officer I was with asked him if he had seen where the suspect went. The officer picked a house on the block we were on, and we went to it and knocked on the door. A young man about 18 years old answered the door, partially opening it and peering out at my partner and me. He was standing on crutches. My partner accused him of harboring a suspect. He denied it. He said that this was his family's home and he was home alone. My partner then forced the door the rest of the way open, grabbed him by his throat, and snatched him out of the house onto the front porch. She took him to the ledge of the porch and, still holding him by the throat, punched him hard in the face and then in the groin. My partner that day snatched an 18-year-old kid off crutches and assaulted him simply for stating the fact that he was home alone. I got the officer off him, but because an aid call had gone out, several other officers had arrived on the scene. One of those officers, who was black, ascended the stairs and asked what was going on. My partner pointed to the young man still lying on the porch and said, "That son of a bitch just assaulted me." The black officer then went up to the young man and told him to get the F up. "I'm taking you in for assaulting an officer." The young man looked up at the officer and said, "Man, you can see I can't go." His crutches lay not far from him. The officer picked him up, cuffed him, and slammed him into the house, where he was able to prop himself up by leaning against it. The officer then told him again to get moving to the police car on the street because he was under arrest. The young man told him one last time in a pleading tone that was somehow angry at the same time, "You can see I can't go." The officer reached down and grabbed both the young man's ankles and yanked up. This caused the young man to strike his head on the porch. The officer then dragged him to the police car. We then searched the house. No one was in it. These kinds of scenes play themselves out every day all over our country and black and brown communities. Beyond that, Beyond the many unarmed blacks killed by police, including recently Freddie Gray in Baltimore, other police abuses that don't result in death foment resentment, distrust, and malice towards police in black and brown communities all over the country. You know, one thing I'm going to say, can you please stop with the black and brown thing? Like, can we just focus on us? Because at the end of the day, our community gets effed up the most. And then you got a lot of Hispanic men and women who are joining the police force for some damn reason, and they're treating black people the same way these racist white police officers are. So, you know, stop. Let's go on. In 2009, Henry Davis was stopped unlawfully in Ferguson, taken to the police station, and brutally beaten while in handcuffs. He was then charged for bleeding on the officers' uniforms after they beat him. I would have sued every single one of those police officers, their mamas, fathers, grandparents, and I would have researched their great-great-grandparents, because they learned this from somewhere. So all y'all gonna get it. Let's go. About that 15% of officers who regularly abuse their power, a major problem is they exert an outsized influence on department culture and find support for their actions from ranking officers and police unions. Chicago is a prime example of this. The city has created a reparations fund for the hundreds of victims who were tortured by former Chicago police commander John Burge and officers under his command from the 1970s to the early 90s. This mofo had 20 years to torture people. And you know, the victims were electrically shocked, suffocated, and beaten into false confessions that resulted in many of them being convicted and serving time from crimes they didn't commit. One man, Daryl Cannon, spent 24 years in prison for a crime he confessed but didn't commit. He confessed when officers repeatedly appeared to load a shotgun, and after doing so each time put it in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Other men received electric shocks until they confessed. The torture was systematic, and the culture that allowed for it is systemic. I'll call your attention to the words "and officers under his command." Police departments are generally a functioning, closed community where people know who is doing what. How many officers under the command of Commander Burge do you think didn't know what was being done to those men? And that's what I was going to say previously. Before this paragraph, I was going to say, yeah, they know. They know a whole lot of things. Imagine how many police officers, the ones who pride themselves on being good, know exactly what these corrupt, evil, racist, and non-racist cops that just don't have no morals do on a daily basis. I was told by dudes in the hood, street dudes, how the officers, like back in the 90s, early 90s, would take, rival gang members and dump them off in each other's set. You know, beat them down and dump them off in the alley in a rival gang community. Yeah, they did some dirty stuff, and then steal the dope dealers, drugs, and money. This is critical to understanding why police community relations in black and brown communities across the country are as bad as they are. Former New York City Police Commissioner Howard Safir did an interview on Fox where he never acknowledges the lived experience of thousands and thousands of blacks in New York, Baltimore, Ferguson, or anywhere in the country. In fact, he seems to be completely unaware of it. This allows him to leave viewers with the impression that the recent protests against police brutality are baseless and that allegations of racism are totally wrong, just not true. The reality of police abuse is not limited to a number of very small incidents that have impacted black people nationwide, but generations of experienced and witnessed abuse. The media is complicit in this myth, taking notice that the interviewer does not challenge Safir. She doesn't point out, for example, the $1 billion in settlements the NYPD has paid out over the last decade and a half for the misconduct of its officers. There are officers around the country who want to address institutional racism. The National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability is a new coalition of current and former law enforcement officers from around the nation. Its mission is to fight institutional racism in our criminal justice system and police culture, and to push for accountability for police officers that abuse their power. Several NYPD officers are the founding members of a group called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, the gold standard for black municipal police organizations. Now let's cut to the perspective of a black patrol woman. My experience of being a black woman in policing, written 2022. In January 1997, when I joined the incoming class of the Essex County, New Jersey Police Academy, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I started my enforcement career working as a meter maid and never expected to become a police officer, having previously worked in social work helping communities navigate the 1980s the crack epidemic. I developed skills for working well with people, especially those who were going through hard times. People began suggesting that I give policing a try, so I did. Once I was in the academy, I immediately realized that not only was I one of maybe 6 women, but one of even fewer black women. This put me in a challenging position. In a male-dominated academy with only one female instructor who sat in the office doing paperwork, I always felt that I had to prove myself. I had to run the fastest, get the highest grades on exams, and show that I belong there like everyone else. We always got to do extra. Ain't y'all tired of doing that, black folks? Won't y'all just say, F it. I'm not going to keep proving myself. We done proved ourselves for over 400 years. That's stress. That's extra stress we put on ourselves. Let's continue. During this time, the O.J. Simpson verdict came down. There were very high tensions that seemed to cut down racial lines. I was made to feel like I had something to do with the verdict merely by being black. I was hoping that as a law and order academy, we could have our opinions but remain impartial. Yeah, right. Let's go on. It was during that time that I got into a heated discussion and was called a racial slur by one of my classmates. We both were penalized, but it showed me that the world I was stepping into was not all fairness and justice. In fact, years later, that same officer would have many formal complaints lodged against him for racially profiling members of the community. They knew that. They knew that that fool was a problem when he called her that name in a classroom where you're supposed to show character and show how you're going to be out there on the streets. They saw it. They just didn't care. Let's go on. All right. His dad or mama, bribed him. Let's go on. The first 5 years of working in my department was frustrating. I was one of only 2 black women, and I was not embraced by everyone. It was hard trying to fit in. The other black woman did not immediately connect with me because she had already been accepted as one of the boys. She was young, was able to hang out at the bars with other officers and cuss like a sailor. I was 30 years old, which made me much older than many officers and gave me a different view of the world. I was also married and had 2 children. Raising a family as an officer was hard. One senior supervisor even said outright that women should not be policing. He would harass me and inspect everything I did with a fine-tooth comb. I was often categorized as a double minority when talks of diversity in the department were brought up. I was female and black, thereby leveling the idea that my department was racist. But I often felt that I had no value in the department as a black woman, often feeling more like a place marker for the department statistics. And then they the first ones want to come out and say a DIY hire, DEI hire, whatever. There wouldn't be a need for that if you guys weren't so racist and unfair, and nepotism wasn't a big thing. This country create jobs for white people. to keep them employed and keep them, financially wealthy, while everybody else got to scrape. And let's go on. As a black female officer, I faced challenges inside the department, but out in the field, it wasn't much easier. Male offenders on the street would often try and sweet talk to me or roughly handle me during interactions. If they were black, they would say I should be ashamed of myself doing this job, locking blacks up. I also experienced judgment when some people in public would see me and my husband in town and would comment that they thought I was gay because my career choice was so masculine and male dominated. As time progressed, I began connecting with minorities in our community and paying attention to their complaints. There were times when I responded to calls of the older minority generation or the very young, and they were happy to see me. The older generation always complained that our department was not diverse enough and that we did not reflect our community. I realized that there were things I could do to make this career work, and I could stop counting down the days to retirement. And one thing I have to say, that black folks, we have to demand that they start having people who look like us patrol our communities and stop just dealing with it. Because these people for damn sure are not going to let you patrol their communities. So sometimes you're going to have to step up and stand up and stop just settling and letting these people do what they want to do. Let's continue. While I often found myself caught in between two worlds, being black and blue, I knew I had a responsibility as a black female officer to bridge the gap. I made it my business to change the attitudes of youth and community members about policing. My idea was one town, one goal. And I realized that I was where I needed to be. Once I was able to get both the department and in the community to see me for who I was, not just black, not just blue, and not just a woman, I was a triple threat and a force to be reckoned with. I was a well-trained, compassionate human being dedicated to protecting and serving the community. As of 2020, there were 324,882 officers in the U.S., 79% male, 18% female, 65% white, and 12.1% black. The number of black female chiefs is approximately 175 or 1% of the policing population. I was amazed in 2017 when I had the pleasure of meeting 6 black female chiefs in my relocated state of North Carolina. When I met them, I told them they had the secret sauce to rising to the top. I retired in 2018. I must say, it was an amazing career journey. I learned to love it with everything that I am, and I am proud of my achievements as well as the lasting legacy and impression that I left in my department and the township that I represented. It is important that the value of diversity is not just box checking, but the inspiration of Georgia Ann Robinson as a call for the future of policing to fully include officers of all genders and backgrounds in order to live out the ideal of law enforcement in partnership with the people. Here's my conclusion. That would be very ideal and not far-fetched at all if this sector wasn't built on oppressing and keeping a stern eye on black folks. Yeah, it would be very idealistic, and then you would have to wonder, as long as the police department has been in existence in this country, why does it lack diversity? Why are they still abusing black folks? Why are they still killing unarmed black men and women and children? You got to ask yourself those questions that some of you guys want to ignore. And the reason why it's still being done is because of what I have been stating. And other people who have done research on, other professional people, other people who are in the police department that tell you the purpose of the police. And some of you guys want to live in this fairy tale world. As corrupt as this world is and being exposed to be, this nation, why are you still living in this dream state? The longer you live in this dream state, the worse it's going to be with you when reality hits you over the head. If black people are joining the police department to be like Georgia Ann Robinson, and I did a video on her last year, I'll put the link to the video in the description. She joined specifically because she was asked to join by black women organizations who wanted black women to represent black women and children, girls, in the police department in Los Angeles, because black women and girls were still being harassed and abused and raped and molested by white men. Yes, this was still happening at the time, and I think she joined in the late 1800s or early 1900s. So black women were still being sexualized and abused and misused by white men. So they thought that it would be a good idea to have a black woman on the force. And what she did was she helped black women. She helped black girls and got them out of violent, dangerous situations, not just in the streets, but from their home lives that were dangerous. So if you're black and you're going to get on the police force to truly help people in your community who look like you and not add to the oppression and disparities, then go for it. Stop thinking about trying to get in this system and turn it around, when no, it's going to be impossible for you and 30 other black officers to turn the system around unless you're willing to go out and expose this whole damn corrupt system. If you're not willing to do that, then what's the point? If you're just going to keep swimming in the sewage and not get out and rinse off, you have to expose it from the top to the bottom. If you can get 500 black police officers from around the country to come together with hard evidence and expose this systemic racist corruption, if you can do that, then hey, you can truly reform this whole police system. But if you're not going to do that, what is the purpose of you being on the police department? Just to say you're a police officer? All right, that's the end. That's all I have to say. I'm about to close up the shop, and thank you for your time and attention. And if you stayed to the end of the video, thank you so much. Share it, like it, add a comment, as it helps a lot. We appreciate your help and support, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.